So I was a regular cannabis user for years, and I always had this justification in my mind as to why I needed it in my life. So if you're a consistent user of cannabis and you feel like you've reached the point where you finally felt like you've identified that this is a potential problem for me, I'm going to share with you some of the obstacles that I face and how to overcome them, and maybe you can apply them to your life and help you finally quit weed for good. So I didn't start smoking the devil's lettuce till like my senior year in high school. It was really weird because in my friend group, I definitely had a couple, guys that were smoking very early on. Luckily for me, I was in the sport of wrestling, so it was something that I was able to attach myself to really be hyper focused on, like this one thing, and that was just being the best wrestler that I possibly could. In turn, I also wanted to be the best person I could, so I didn't want to put something into my system or use, something that would negatively impact that result. One of the things that I can vividly remember about my first time using weed and cannabis was just how like excited and euphoric I felt using it. I had a lot of issues with my self-confidence going into my middle school and high school, early high school years because, I was picked on a lot. I was picked on a lot. I wasn't very tall, I was kind of short, so I was always an easy target to be picked on. So this, definitely didn't help my self confidence. I wasn't very confident in my own skin. I felt like people didn't like me, even if they didn't know me. So it was a hard thing to navigate in my early life, really. I also feel like I have an addictive personality. So like, I always had this hobby that I got super hyper focused on, and I would do it. It's like clockwork all the time. For instance, wrestling, and that was something that I was able to latch on that maybe a little more consistently just because I had brothers that were in it too. But like things like, whatever, like early on doing this YouTube channel, like I would do a couple videos and then I would sputter out because I would get super hyper focused, and then I would lose, I don't know if it's lose interest, but I just definitely lost like the focus on like as to what I'm trying to achieve, even if it's like a specific goal or whatnot. And really what contributed to that, to me not following through on those actions was because I was addicted to weed. And so as I talk about some of these obsessions, the biggest obsession that I really had in my life during this time was not just weed, the greens, it was video games. And video games was very exciting for me because, my brothers, my friends all did it. It was something that kind of brought us together at the time. And, we always got the brand new PlayStation. We always had the Xbox. So always had the new shiny toy. And, Call of Duty was very addicting. And, really started to take a turn for the worse when I tried for the first time smoking and then playing video games. It was like it was like a whole new world opened up to me. So when I was playing video games with that high, it was like it was just a rush. It was like an endorphin, dopamine, crazy influx, and I could really spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours into the wee hours in the morning playing video games while I was high and really not feel affected at all. But as I began transitioning into my early 20s, maybe 24, 25, something like that, I started to realize that, I was a loser. I was not living a fulfilling life, at least according to the dreams that I'd manifested in my head. I definitely wanted more out of my life. And it was super weird because I always had a job. I was always working, but when I really started to notice that it was becoming a problem was when I would skip work, I would call in for work, and I would just stay home all day, smoking weed and playing video games. It was very damning to my life, but at the time, because I was so sucked into that world, it's so hard to really identify that this is the reason that's causing me to not be fulfilled in my life, or it caused me to be situationally depressed several times, and it's hard coming out of that, especially when you're not contributing to what might actually be the problem, which for me was video games and weed. So since quitting weed 131 days ago, here are some of the things that some of the challenges I face and some of the ideas about like how I was able to overcome them and how they made me feel too once finally quitting weed during this time. So my sleep, when I was smoking, I definitely justified it just like I justified actually doing it as to like, oh, I need to smoke to sleep, or I need to smoke to relax my mind and just, forget about the day's stressors. And that was, definitely not a positive thing, even though I definitely felt like it was a positive thing at the time. So I would think I was getting maybe, some nights were maybe 3 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep. And yeah, it was just something that I never really paid too much attention to because I got so much joy out of like doing that thing. My head was so wrapped up in playing video games and smoking with my friends. It was just something that drew me in addictively. Definitely a bad habit. So early on in these 131 days, as I really started to focus on fixing my sleep, um, while I wasn't smoking, it was definitely a little bit. I didn't sleep hard like all the way through. I wasn't getting that sound sleep. I also noticed that I was quick to anger. I was very irritable. Uh, Not a great feeling because I'm definitely a super patient person. So it was really glaring to me when I realized like, oh, I've kind of got a short fuse. And the reason why I had a short fuse was because, I was smoking every night and I wasn't really letting my body recover from the continuous weeks and months and at some point, years of just continuous cannabis abuse. Another one of my biggest struggles, and this might have been the absolute biggest one, sleep is super important, but for me, the procrastination. I would smoke, I would play video games, and that's all I would do for the rest of the night. I would go to work, get home, smoke, play video games, and it was just a perpetuating cycle that I lost myself during this time. So, uh, because of the obsession, it was a hard thing for me. It I never was able to find success in my life because I wasn't doing the things that I was manifesting in my head. Again, the dreams that I kind of were drawing up, like I want to be a coach, I want to have a business, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I was doing none of that stuff. All I was doing was smoking weed and playing video games. So obviously, you know, at the time it was like, okay, well, I was getting depressed, but I didn't know why I was getting depressed. Well, I was getting depressed because I wasn't doing the thing that I'm saying I was going to do. Like, I'm going to be successful one day. Well, how am I supposed to be that if I'm just maintaining these bad habits and, justifying why I was doing them? So transition into my early 30s, I definitely learned a lot throughout these years. Like I said, I was able to stop every once in a while, but I do feel like it was more of I didn't have access to it at the time, moving from Michigan to Wisconsin. But I knew what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to be successful. I knew that I needed to find a way to break this habit for good. And despite all of these realizations that I had in my life, I still found it really difficult to finally stop. I remember one of the first things that really started to help me finally start to break away slowly was just developing my mindset. I knew that if I was able to really break down why it is I was smoking, what it was affecting a lot, but some of the most important things in my life that it was affecting, my relationship with my wife, me being able to achieve the dreams and goals that I set out to achieve. Uh, I needed to get clarity from that mindset and really start to build on the skills that it was going to take to finally break free and quit weed for good. So I really started to dedicate my attention to the positive things in my life that I had going for me to kind of draw myself away from all that negative that I was doing. So, traveling with my wife, uh, I had, I've got a newborn daughter now. So being a better father, being a better husband, exercise was a huge one. Exercise is the most important thing that you can ever do in your lifetime. I truly believe that because it's going to help, your mental health, it's going to help your physical health, and it's going to help your spiritual health. And, I was definitely still exercising while I was smoking throughout those years, but it just wasn't as like dialed in as I could be. So like now it's just, I'm there, I'm focused, I'm in it. I know exactly what I'm doing. Before it's like, okay, well, I'm just kind of here because I've been doing it, right? I've got the wrestling background, I've got the sports background. I was always active, but it wasn't I never had that goal like I'd had in wrestling. So I just didn't have some sort of direction. And because of that, it was easy for me to fall into these addictive habits. So my biggest breakthrough finally came when I just admitted the truth. And the truth was that I was the one that was in control of quitting, right? Ultimately, it was my decision. And everything that I've been going through wasn't because of the weed. I mean, it definitely contributed to like allowing me to be more easily manipulated. But the decision to ultimately quit was going to be me. No amount of success, no one was was going to be able to come help me overcome this. It was something I had to do by myself. And, you know, I had built up this story for years and years and years as to why I needed it in my life and how much better it made me and how much better it made me feel. And it was all lies. So I definitely just finally got to the point in my life where I was able to admit the truth. It was not helping me. It was making things worse in my life. all the success that I was dreaming about, everything that I would talk with my wife about what we were trying to build, it was a hindrance. And it took, really destroying my life to the point where I was almost unable to come back from it, was when I finally was able to admit this truth to myself. And it's really changed everything for me. My daughter, my wife, they deserve a man who's going to be there to contribute and help build a fantastic future for them. And I want to be the example, right? It's put yourself in the best position to be successful, work on your health, have the best body that you possibly can have, and everything else will fall into place. That's what they deserve. And I realized, I was definitely failing. I was not hitting that mark at all. So it was just got to the point where there was I was going to either change or, I would die trying. And here we are now, 131 days. And I can proudly and honestly say that, I've gotten to the point where I don't believe I'll ever go back to it. Just for everyone out there, it's like, I'm not in any way demeaning cannabis use. I do think if you're in a specific age group, you're a middle schooler to high school age, 12 to 18, 12 to 19, you're probably not a great idea to start on, smoking. It's not going to serve you. If anything, it's going to contribute to more negative habits in your life. Now, there are people out there, in their 50s, 60s that do enjoy occasional smoking. It's like, if that does not stop you from being successful, it doesn't stop you from being the person that you're supposed to be, then by all means. I think there's some great research. There's some great stuff going on in terms of cancer and how it's helping, cancer patients. I mean, there's so much other stuff out there that are good, right? Seizures, there's a lot of great things that's going on. So just the actual smoking part is just a little bit different. It's not as heavily, backed. It's definitely more damning, I feel, for younger, kids and teenagers and, moving into their early 20s. It's something that I felt like it's probably best to steer away from it. Again, with everything, if you're doing it and you just personally feel like it's not stopping you from being that successful person, then by all means, this video isn't for you. But if you're someone who's definitely felt like you are having a very hard time quitting and you're not really sure why, hopefully that this message will kind of help you understand it a little bit more. Self-reflection, guys, is going to be the hugest, the biggest contributing factor to you really figuring out, is this damaging? Am I ruining my life because of this? Am I doing habits that I potentially would not do because I was under the influence of weed? I was high all the time. Over time, even though early on I was feeling great, over time I started to realize, like, I don't feel good. And because I was addicted, I just couldn't get out of that. But, you guys need to evaluate this for your own lives and really apply it to everything you're doing. Is this serving my future? Is it helping me push towards these goals, X, Y, and Z? Again, self-reflection, self-evaluate, okay? All right, so if you guys struggled, as I just mentioned, please, feel free to share your experiences down below. Let me know if it's something that you're still working on or if it's something that you've overcome. Share your experiences down below. People that are going to be watching this video are going to want to hear from you, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear your success, and I want to hear what your hardships are, what are the obstacles you're trying to overcome, and what helped you finally break through that plateau. So if you guys are looking for a little bit more backstory on me, I want you guys to watch this video next.